Alright, another photo mishmash. I'm going to try to bring these to you every week, every Friday is my goal. And it's just kind of a general roundup of some product announcements, maybe some mini reviews of new products I've got in, kind of teasing what I'll be talking about in the future. And just a general discussion, usually around some kind of topic, and some reader questions answered. And so the one I'm most excited to share with you in this video is my favorite image I made from my traveling, so stay tuned to see that, plus a couple other images that I really like. But let's talk a little bit about some product announcements that happened while I was out traveling. CES happened, Consumer Electronic Trade Show. Now, that's generally not a huge event in the realm of photography. It's really targeted at kind of consumers and kind of gadgets for your house, but there are often some photography announcements. Nikon has announced their new lowest end DSLR. It's the Nikon D3300. The big news in that is they have dropped that anti-aliasing filter. Even sharper images should be pretty nice, very similar to the D5300 probably. You don't get the articulating screen, and you get a little bit slower frame rate and a few less focus points, but it's a lot of camera for your money. The other big piece of news with that, big, small, is that a redesigned 18-55 lens, kit lens that's going to come with that. First, I heard that, very excited, because if you've been following me for a while, you know I'm really not a fan of the Nikon 18-55 kit lens. I'm not a kit basher in general. I think they're a great place to start as you figure out what's kind of important to you in photography, and they don't add a lot to the cost of the camera. But the 18-55 has not kept up. The quality of that lens or the resolution of that lens is just nowhere near the sensors that they're putting in these Nikon cameras, and it shows. But Nikon has said that this image quality is the same. What is different about this lens is that it compacts down to a smaller size. So I think you're really seeing the big camera manufacturers, Nikon and Camera, really feeling the pressure of these mirrorless cameras. They are small, they are providing excellent image quality. You do make some sacrifices, but I'll tell you what, I look back at the images I've made over this trip over the last couple of weeks. I lugged around a lot of gear. The last photo mishmash really showed you what I brought. I called it traveling light because we didn't bring all of our lenses. But my shoulder was pretty sore on multiple days, and I look back at the pictures I made and thought, I really could have made these pictures with any of the decent mirrorless cameras, and even some of the older ones. I didn't, and I didn't make any amazing pictures on this trip. I was calling it a photocation, but it was turned out to be a little bit more vacation than photocation. But I had a great time. So we'll get back to that in a second. So my point is, though, I think we're really going to see some viable options. They're there now in the mirrorless markets, and the big DSLR manufacturers are a little afraid and producing these smaller cameras. Canon's got the SL1, which I actually think is starting to sell quite well based on the number of questions I'm hearing from people about that, and looking at a couple of videos I've produced about it. The analytics of how much those are getting watched has really increased over the past month or so. So there is some desire, even though they're not that much smaller. People are looking for those smaller, lighter bits. And so I think that's pretty interesting. Sigma announced the 50 f1.4. They already have a 50-1.4, but this is a complete redesign. It's in their signature art series, similar to their 35 f1.4. It is going to work on a full frame or crop sensor. It looks to be excellent build quality. Is that very similar to that 35, which is just built like a steel rock. Is that a thing, a steel rock? It's built like one. And we haven't heard a lot about image quality yet, but again, that 35 is just beautiful. The Sigma 18-35 is also beautiful, so they've really stepped it up. And interesting quote from, I think it was their CEO the other day, that they actually see Zeiss as their main competitor, not Canon and Nikon's L-class lens. So that's interesting. I think there's a little bit of marketing speak in that, but that's what they're aiming for, and they're doing a great job, so that's impressive. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about my trip. I said I was calling it a photocation. I had goals in mind of making some really nice pictures. For those who didn't know or weren't following along on my Instagram, I spent some time in Washington State with family, and then down in California, San Francisco, driving down along the coast all the way to San Diego, and spending some time with family there. My brother lives out there and his wife, and they just had their newborn baby, which is very exciting. But what I realized quickly is that bringing a lot of photo gear with you and also trying to spend time with family and friends, it's tricky. And even when you're not with family or friends, I'm looking at this pile of gear I brought along with me, and there were times where I either felt guilty or felt like I should get moving and go take pictures. And that's not necessarily a good way to feel on vacation sometimes. So this doesn't apply to everybody, but I really like the idea of kind of simplicity and shooting much simpler. And again, looking back at my pictures, I might feel different if I had made 5 or 6 really top-notch pictures. But really, there's only one picture that I love, and then there's a handful of pictures that I'm very happy with. But, for instance, Christina brought along just her iPhone and a medium format film camera, and shot all of her Instagram pictures. There's a link down below to her Instagram with the iPhone, and has, wonderful pictures. And, of course, there's no doubt that that's a good camera. But it's so light, and it's very nice. Kind of ironically, though, strapped around her neck was a giant medium format, not a giant, but a large and heavy medium format film camera. She also did bring her 5D for video, and so hopefully we'll kind of put together a little vacation video for some of her clips and my clips. I didn't shoot much video, and I didn't shoot any video for you guys. I'd hoped to, but I really got into that vacation mode and got stuck there, for better or worse. I'm saying for better. So, let's spend a few moments though and look at just a couple of my pictures. I hope to come back to these in the near future, especially using Lightroom, and kind of talk about them. I've had several reader questions recently about Lightroom, and as the temperatures drop and I'm less inclined to spend time shooting kind of how-to videos outside, I'd love to do more with Lightroom and kind of unpack how easy it is to work with it. Somebody asked me the other day, says, is it all about layers? And that's the beauty of Lightroom. It's not all about layers. It's just these sliders. Just slide the slider to the right. Does it look better? No. Slide it to the left. Does it look better? Yes. Leave it there. And it really is quite simple. The interface can be a little daunting looking at first. But let me stop talking, or at least stop talking for a second, and spin around and let's take a look at some of the photos that I've taken. Alright, so I just picked out a couple of images that I'm really happy with from the trip, and I'm just going to breeze through them. Well, let's start with this one here. This is outside of San Francisco, just north of San Francisco, a small grove of redwood trees. I'm shooting with a 24. Now, in the previous Mishmash video where I said, here's the gear I'm bringing, I talked a little bit about bringing the 70-200. I am really glad that I brought that. The sucker is heavy, and as I said, my shoulder was sore some days. And in that video, I talked about, most of my landscape videos in the previous year that I really liked had actually been made with that lens, because it really allows you to kind of simplify and compress and isolate your subject. Those are all different things, but they all allow you really happy with the way pictures came out using that lens. Looking back at my metadata in the library, in reality, there was only one picture, and it's just this duck picture actually that I've thrown up on Instagram, that I've selected out of all of them shot with the 70-200. Now, I haven't done a completely careful look through all of my pictures yet. I think there are a couple others shot with the 70-200, but primarily it was the 24-70 that I was using. If we go real quick and we get rid of these 2 stars, and there's some family pictures. Let's go past. Well, no, I just want to look at this up here. All photographs. Actually, no stars. There we go. So we're up to 18,000 images that were taken over the course of about a month. And that sounds like a lot, but what we're looking at in there is 16,000 from the GoPro, and a lot of those were time-lapse. Now, I have to say, I'm going to show you a couple cool, not today, but soon, a couple cool little kind of spin time-lapse videos that I'm really happy with the way they came out, kind of give you a 360 look. And that was just spinning with the GoPro running in time-lapse mode. So with the 5D Mark III, I took about 2,200 pictures, or we could just say it, 2,232. And then you can see the breakdown over here by lenses. And you can see 882 with the 24-70 and 830 with the 70-200, so quite a bit. I threw up a graphic that showed this on Facebook, and there were some comments about the 40 coming along with all of these other L lenses. Darn straight, the 40 is a great lens, and I love the fact that it makes the camera so much more portable. Going out in the evening, or just when you want to go out on a quick light hike and you don't want to carry everything, but you still want a nice camera with you, throwing the 40 on any DSLR that you have with you, any Canon DSLR, is great. And so that came along with us as well. And then you can see the breakdown. I've got this right now by focal length, which is pretty neat that you can do that. So, you know, a fair number wide, and then you can see my 200 at the 40, and then 200 using the 51.2. And the one difference that I want to talk about with the kind of your mirrorless cameras is your depth of field. It's much, much harder to get a very shallow depth of field with the smaller sensors. So that is one place. But looking back at my images, except for a couple that I threw up on Instagram, there's none that are really kind of amazing depth of field stuff. This one actually is kind of neat. I like how soft that is in the background. So again, that's shooting at f1.4. And on a full frame camera, you really get that nice shallow depth of field. And one other kind of abstract towards the end. No, I've lost it. Some blurry ones. Not the one I wanted to show. So let's get back to 2 stars. And here we go. Okay. So this was at 24. This is the reason I decided to start to go down this road. About 24 on a full frame sensor is a little bit wider than 18 on a crop sensor. And so this little grove of redwoods here, I really like how they're kind of all reaching in. I may have taken one with the GoPro here as well, but I haven't dug through all of those GoPro shots. Before going out there, this is the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I had hoped to get a nice evening shot or a very early morning shot. But this is where vacation mode really kicked in, and being up here with my brother and his very pregnant wife. And, you know, I wanted to go get dinner. I didn't want to wait around for the sun to set completely. And so this is the best shot I got out of this. I did take some other shots that can be composited together into a higher resolution kind of panorama. But we'll see how those look as well. And I just really like this. I had taken a bunch of sunset pictures up here in Sonoma, actually just north of San Francisco again. And they were interesting, but there wasn't anything that really set them apart from a sunset picture anywhere else. So then I kind of really started to look around and say, what can I take a picture of that is going to make this a little bit different? And I found this nice, completely bare tree. I think this might be a live oak, or actually I have no idea what I'm saying, what kind of tree it is. But that gave it some kind of, I think, life, and gave it a little bit more of a place, because you don't get this kind of tree all over the place. And so that was that. Then driving along the coast, some just really gorgeous places, and I just loved the way the sun was still shining through the waves as they were kind of rose up through this kind of narrow cliff area here. And this is another great example of what Lightroom can do. The original, this sky up here was pretty much blown out white. But by shooting raw, working in Lightroom, I was able to bring that all out. This here is a great learning experience. This is a little bit further down the coast near Monterey, and actually the way the coastline bends, this is a sunrise. How often do you get to say you watch the sun rise over the water on the west coast of the United States? Not very often. So I thought, I'm going to get up early and capture that. And as soon as I got out there, about 15 minutes, maybe 20 even, before the sun came up, I realized I was too late for the really exciting picture. The really exciting picture would have been to have a really long a long exposure that would have completely smoothed this water out. But even as we were shooting at f9 right now, I'm at 1/125th of a second, I did have a circular polarizer on to cut down some of that light and to bring out the little bit of saturation in the sky. So it's not quite as exciting as I want. It's still a fairly nice picture, and I'm kind of happy with this kind of wide perspective. Again, that was the 24. This is a place just a little bit south of Monterey, California. Just gorgeous watercolor. This really has not been bumped up in saturation or vibrance. This is just how it looked, and it's I'm just happy with the way the colors are. And you know, maybe I'll take that little contrail of that plane out or something like that, but it doesn't really bother me too much. Those are the easy things to do in Lightroom. This is great. I don't know. Again, you have to watch the first video where I talked about all the different pieces I'm going to bring. And one of the things I talked about was the GoPro and the suction cup mount. And I said, make sure you don't mount it outside your car. You got to have permits and stuff like that. Well, we started going down the coastal highway and realized the shot from inside the car just stunk. So we stuck it to the rear mirror. We did a super secure shoelace connection there and powered it up. And I have to say, I don't know if it was worth it. And it crashed twice during that drive, the GoPro, not the car. And, you know, fiddling with it, it did take a bit away from the whole kind of fun of just driving down the coast, worrying about whether the GoPro is not. I just have to let that go. And then the results that it got are not spectacular. I'll put those together and show you. They're pretty interesting. And I think it's fun as a memory. But it's nothing that really shares the experience of obviously doing it. Alright, there's the duck. Let's skip through a couple of these. This was just a funky store in LA that had just gotten repainted and hadn't reopened yet. This is an excellent example, though, of the difference of what vibrance and saturation will do, those sliders in Lightroom. So vibrance really is a kind of a color equalizer. It finds those colors that aren't really popping and amps them up without crazy oversaturation of the colors that are already fairly bright. So you can see that it doesn't look too crazy, even all the way over to the right. And when you go all the way left, you're starting at grayscale, but you still have those colors in it. Saturation really is an equalizer of color throughout the thing. It affects all colors equally. So you can see you can make it a black and white by bringing the saturation all the way down. That's not the best way to do it because it's really just kind of pulling the color out. And you want a little more contrast than that. You can go the other way, and that doesn't look good. I personally am really not a fan of oversaturated images. All right, ready? This is my favorite image from the trip. So I had in mind that Golden Gate shot at evening. That didn't happen. And an under the pier shot either in the evening or early morning. And the time worked out best to be early morning. I got there about an hour before sunrise. Very foggy overcast. This is the Manhattan Beach Pier, just outside of LA. As I said, an hour before sunrise. And it was very, very dark. I actually sat in the car for a few minutes and thought, oh, I should just wait here. Very foggy, as I said. And then headed out there. And even as dark as it was, the camera had a lot of trouble focusing. I ended up using my cell phone as a flashlight to shine it on one of these closer pilings to get focus and then recompose. And 30 seconds at f9, and you can see how bright it is. And so again, about an hour, actually right now we're probably, this image was about a half an hour before the sun rose. But that long exposure of 30 seconds just completely mists and smooths out the water. There was a lot of wave action. There were actually some surfer kids just off here, just left. That's right, half an hour. Maybe those you California folks aren't surprised by that, but it was really interesting. They were like 2 13, 14-year-old kids. Sun's not even up, and they're out there on the waves. You know, good wave action, but that long exposure just smooths everything out. And so I was really happy with that, happy with the reflections right here. And then a few minutes later, we're starting to get some really nice pink in the sky, and I'm really happy with this image as well. And this kind of really reflects the color of the morning as that sun is coming up behind us, of course, because this is a part of the coastline that's normal and facing west, so the sun's behind us. I think that's all I want to share right now. So let's talk a little bit, let's talk about reader questions. All right, this is already going longer than I wanted it to. So 2 reader questions that I've gotten over the last couple of weeks. One, I'm going to split this out into its own video that I hope to get up in the next week or two, really talk in more detail. But a lot of questions about your external flash, how it should be used, which direction it should be pointed, and there are a lot of opinions about that. But I think the simplest, safest way, if you're shooting inside a home with normal-ish colors on the walls, lighter colors, you should just be bouncing it, and you should turn it backwards, and that's at about 45 degrees up, and not directly behind, kind of so it's firing over a shoulder, hitting a wall, and sealing is your goal. Now, this is the Yongnuo 468. It does not rotate 360 on the back. It ends up right here, so you can't bounce it over this shoulder. It's not a huge deal, but it does affect your images. To compensate, you could just shoot it straight up. Not as good. You're going to get darker shadows right underneath, especially somebody like me with a little bit deeper eye sockets. Those are going to cast shadows and then make them look even deeper. So those are the kind of things you're watching out for. And by bouncing it at an angle, you're kind of filling it down and in, so you get less of those harsh shadows that you're going to watch out for. So the next model up, I talk about this. I'll have a link down to those Yongnuos that I've talked about before. I mentioned which ones do the more of the rotation all the way around. It's not a huge deal if you're just a parent trying to capture nicer pictures of your kids inside, or just nicer pictures inside in general. This will do just fine. This is great, and that's what you want to do with your flash. What I like to do in the next week or so is take you into some different kind of environments. What do you do in the huge room? My heart always sinks a little bit when we go to these weddings with these receptions where the ceiling is gigantic, way up there, or it's black and it's just going to absorb the flash. That makes it a little trickier, but there are things that you can do that still makes bounce flashes work. In general, I'm not a fan of pointing it directly at the person. And not a fan of all of those flash modifiers. They just don't do enough other than cut down the amount of light, and that's not really what you want. It's kind of the quality and direction of the light you want more than just cutting it down by putting some white thing here that's absorbing some of the light. The other question I've been getting is mostly from Canon 70D folks. I don't have it with me right now. But on the dial is a custom mode, and the 5D Mark III has several custom modes. What do you do with this? And the answer is really whatever you want. I'll tell you how I use it often and how I used it on this trip some. With my 5D Mark III, and when I have more than one, I set one of those custom, or I should back up a second and say, the custom mode on the dial is a place for you to set basically of all of the settings that you can set in the camera a certain way. So whenever you return to that dial, it will all of those settings will be the same. Shutter speed, your aperture, your ISO, your focus mode, your drive mode, whether you want high speed or low speed, or your self timer, and more. Custom settings even will be saved into that. With the 5D Mark III, I usually save one of those as my video setup. Remember, I usually try to, a lot of usuallys, try to follow the rule of thumb of my shutter speed being 2 times my frame rate. I shoot 99% of my videos at 1080 and 24 frames a second. 2 times 24 gets you 48. The closest shutter speed we can get for that is 1/50th of a second. So that mark on the dial is always set to 1/50th of a second, and then I often resave my other settings there, the aperture and the ISO, based on the day, the quality of light when I'm shooting, and it will change over the course of the day. But let's say I'm outside shooting in bright light, it'll be 1/50th of a second, probably a smaller aperture, and of course a very low ISO. Or I'm inside now shooting at night, I'm going to go ahead and open that aperture up, I'm going to raise that ISO and save that. So that allows me to go to other modes on the dial, take normal pictures, and then quickly switch back and be as close to my desired values as possible. Another way that I use this, and most recently traveling, walking around Chinatown and San Francisco, I wanted to get some kind of long exposures of the Chinese lanterns at the top. Notice I didn't show this to you because they didn't come out. They're not interesting enough. They came out, but they're not interesting enough. And I wanted to get some long exposures of the cars coming down the road with these Chinese lanterns overhead. But I was also taking regular kind of street snap pictures as well. So I set a mode on the dial, or I set up my camera for a long shutter speed of about a second, an aperture that was appropriate for that. And again, this was night, the light levels weren't changing, so I could set all of this, and saved it to the custom mode on the dial, and walk around and take normal pictures in manual mode at the different settings that I needed to change for whatever I was doing. And then if a car was coming down the road, or if it looked like it was going to be a good opportunity, I can quickly move it back to that custom dial, and I instantly have that shutter speed set again, the aperture that's appropriate for that shutter speed, and all of those other settings as well. So There are some people that set it up to be a certain way, landscape, because you can set your picture styles in there as well. You can set, all of those values, and you can also set something that makes it easier to hand off to somebody else to take a picture of you. But usually what I do is just put it on the green square if I'm handing it off to like a waiter or waitress and saying, will you take a picture of us or somebody at the park. Okay, that was a lot. So, photo mishmash. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, leave them down below. If you have reader questions you would like to see featured in a future photo mishmash, leave those down below. Or even better, come over and find me on Facebook. Really building up a great community of folks there. Even with the changes here on YouTube and the Google+, it's a little bit easier to stay on top of comments, but I do a much better job over at Facebook. It's just a little bit more organized there. So take the time to come on over there and leave a question if you really want it answered. Thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. That is powerful and supports me. It's a start. Thank you.